Guys, and I'm back again with another interesting story for you. This is Joyce Knows Who Done It. Another mystery. Now, if you like the channel, subscribe. You watch it, you might as well subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me what your intuition tells you on what was wrong with this story. Thumbs up and also ring the bell. I didn't know how important that was, but it is important, so you might as well ring it. I've got an interesting story. This story is about what can happen in a beautiful suburb called Frederick, Colorado. Yes, this story is about Chris Watts and Shanann Watts. Very interesting and sad story. This is probably the most saddest story that I've done, simply because of the whole circumstance of the situation. As we know, that Chris actually confessed that he killed his wife and his actually 3 children. There was Becca, Cece, they were 3 and 4, and the unborn baby, which was Nick, that he took their life out of his own selfishness. I'll put it that way. So let's talk about this. On August 13th, 2018, Shanann came home. Her friend Nicole dropped her off around about 2 in the morning. She'd gone to a business trip in Arizona. She was part of this multi-marketing company, and it was called Thrive. And she was really good at her job. Her friend, though, dropped her off that morning early. And the next morning, they had some plans. The friend, which also, like I said, name was Nicole, came to the house and was knocking and ringing the bell. And she looked into the garage, because the garage was closed, but there was windows going across the garage. She could see that Shanann's car was in there. And so she got very upset, not knowing what was going on. Maybe Shanann was hurt, or being that she was far along in her pregnancy, maybe something good was not happening. And so Nicole called the police. She explained to them that she'd come to the house looking for her friend Shanann, who had 2 little children and pregnant with another, and she wasn't answering the phone. Her car was there. She wouldn't just leave her car sitting there. The police came and they looked around. Unfortunately, the police could not get into the house unless they had the permission of the homeowner. Nicole then contacts Shanann's mom, thinking that she might have the code pass key to get into the garage so they could see what was going on. But the police said they could not still get into the house or the garage unless they had the permission of the homeowner. At that time, a neighbor was standing across from them and on his porch, and he asked the police what was going on. And he said, they're just, there's a problem over here. We haven't seen the neighbor. Have you seen her? And the neighbor said no, he hadn't. But he said that he had a camera that was set so it caught their house on every bit of the footage. He put the camera there because kids were racing up and down the street, and he wanted to try to catch them doing that. But the camera was on 24 hours a day. In fact, Nicole was so concerned, she even called the doctor, because she knew that Shanann had an OBGYN appointment, a doctor's appointment that day, and the doctor said she never made her appointment. Now, if you know Shanann, she was very much about following procedures and rules and structure. She just was that way. And that's what actually made her successful. But she would not just blow off a doctor's appointment, especially as it came to having this child. When Nicole had talked to Shanann's mom, the mother said that her mother and father lived in North Carolina, there in Colorado. So the mother said, well, she had called looking for Shanann as well, and she didn't answer her phone. So she called Chris, and Chris said that she was over at a friend's house, and he didn't know where she was. Since they didn't know where she was, of course, they were terribly upset. It was quite some time, and then Chris got home. But the time could have been because According to him, it was about 45 minutes to an hour to his job site. He got in, he let the police in. The police asked for permission. Chris let them in, and they started searching the house. And immediately, her friend, Shanann's friend, Nicole, sees, oh, her phone is here. She wouldn't leave her phone. And then she saw that Shanann's purse was there, including with Shanann's medicine. You see, Shanann had lupus, and she couldn't go a day without that medicine. And so now things are really kind of getting chaotic because her car is at home in the garage, her purse is at home, her medicine is in her purse, her phone is at home, but where's everyone else? There was no one in the house, and not only was Shanann not there, but the children's blanket, they had cuddle blankets that they slept with, and they weren't there either. Shanann was a real go-getter, okay? She was highly motivated, highly driven, so much so that by the time that she was 25, she had saved up and earned up and saved, I should say, enough money where she was able to build her own house, And later on, she started feeling like she had some kind of flu symptoms. Every day she was feeling sick. And when she finally got it checked, she found out she had lupus. During this time, she had met Chris. She met Chris online on Facebook. Never thought that she would meet him or anything else, but they did. They ended up meeting, and he married her. Even though he knew she had lupus, and he would go to her doctor's appointments, and he was very supportive of her. So she felt like, wow, yeah, this is the one for me, and they married. Now, Shanann's family really loved Chris because Chris was taking care of Shanann and being a support system for her. But Chris's family, his mother and his sister, allegedly did not like Shanann. They said that she was too bossy and she was too controlling, and she had taken him from North Carolina, which Shanann and Chris were originally from, and brought him out to Colorado, taking him away from them. So they didn't deal with her, so much so that when they had the actual wedding, Shanann's family came. Chris's family did not even show up for the wedding. They so much did not support her or him marrying her. Now, back to when the police showed up, the neighbor came over and told the police, hey, we've got this video footage. Maybe we can see what happened on the video footage. So they began to show the footage on Chris's television. And you could see that Chris's truck was parked in the parking lot, or the parking space, not in the garage. The neighbor was really suspicious about this because he said that, first of all, Chris never has that car sitting outside of the garage. This truck, this gray truck, he says he always has it in the garage. The neighbor was also suspicious because Chris was real talkative and jittery and moving around, and the neighbor said you could ask anybody. Chris doesn't talk to anybody. He's totally silent. He doesn't deal with anybody, and today he's acting way too suspicious. Now, the police kind of poo-pooed that, and they told the neighbor, well, under the circumstances with his wife missing, he would naturally be more talkative. But the neighbor knew better, and they should have listened to the neighbor. So on this is August 13th, because Shanann came home at 2 o'clock in the morning. So now the day has passed and it's morning. Now it's the next day, and it's August 14th. And the police call Chris because they want more detailed descriptions of Shanann and the girls, and want to know, could she have gone any place, or is anywhere she had left? Oh, by the way, when they were in the house, when the police came that first day looking through the house, Chris comes walking out of the room with Shanann's wedding ring on the tip of his finger, like really distancing himself from her, okay, and saying that he found this by the bed. In other words, he was trying to create a story or a narrative that she was tired of the marriage and she up and left him. The police said, was there any note that she left with that? And he said no. So I don't think the police really went for that. But anyways, the police ended up calling Chris, got some descriptions, any information that he could know about his family. This is his family. At this point, he hasn't been especially emotional, but it's still the next day, August 14th. Now, the police as well as neighbors start searching for her, and they're canvassing the neighborhood with flyers. The only thing that Chris is doing is he had an interview with the local news station and asking for his family's safe return. Chris never shed a tear. Chris never canvassed the neighborhood. He never went on a search for her. He did nothing that showed that he desperately wanted them back. Like I said, all he did was talk about wanting his family back, and his house doesn't feel like a home without them there. Now, let's take it back a little bit. 6 weeks prior, well, now it's like 7 weeks prior to this, Shanann and the girls decide to go back to North Carolina from Colorado to visit her parents and Chris's parents. Say they lived so far away, they wanted to spend some time with them. Chris, unfortunately, was not able to take the trip for 6 weeks. Chris did come on the last week, but we'll get to that. While they were there, Shanann had taken the girls over to Chris's mom's house. And one of the girls, I think it was Bella, was highly allergic to particular foods and peanuts and things like that. The mother, her grandmother, Chris's mother, had bought some ice cream and brought it home and gave it to the little girl, or was about to. Shanann walked into the kitchen and saw what was going on, and she lost it because, first of all, she already knew that the family didn't like her, and now you're going to give this food to my child that could possibly kill her. Shanann went off. She was yelling and screaming and everything else, so much so that Chris's family had to kick her out of the house. And when she went, she was glad to go, and she went back to her family's house, and she had been texting a girlfriend of hers, and she told that girlfriend, "I will never deal with the family again." She even texted Chris at this time and asked him to talk to your dad so the dad can talk to your mom to say, ask him, why would the mother do this? Why would you put your grandchild or almost kill your grandchild with giving her food she couldn't eat? Evidently, the grandmother, or Chris's mom, said that she didn't know that the little girl was so highly allergic to foods. I don't know. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. They didn't live in the same town, so that's hard to say. Anyways, now Chris and Shanann are basically in a text relationship. Shanann was extremely upset with Chris because Chris made zero effort to be in touch with her or the girls. He didn't text. He wasn't FaceTiming, nothing. He had promised them that he'd be in touch with them. He was not in touch with them. So much so that Shanann started bringing up, maybe we shouldn't be together. Maybe this relationship isn't working. Chris started immediately backtracking and being apologetic and everything, but he didn't live up to those words. He didn't continue calling or staying in touch with them. Now, on the last week, and that would be week 6, Chris flew out to visit the family. And of course, the little girls and Shanann were so happy. Shanann actually loved Chris. I mean, tremendously. And of course, Bella and Cece loved him dearly. Not to mention the fact Shanann was pregnant, so her hormones were raging, and she really needed him for his support, and he wasn't there for her. When he got to Shanann in North Carolina, Shanann thought that they would have some intimate adult time together. He'd be romantic or hugging her. He gave her nothing. He was basically cold to her. And she was absolutely devastated by this. And she was contacting her friend and telling him how Chris is so cold to her. He's not trying to hug her, pat her buns, or none of the above. Nothing. No intercourse. He had basically nothing to do with her. When she brought it up, he would say he was sleepy or tired. And Shanann started getting suspicious. She wasn't a fool, believe me. And she felt like maybe he was seeing somebody. He denied it all the while. The actual truth was he was having an affair. There was a young lady who started at his company. He worked at an oil company in Colorado. And she had started there, and she was very attractive, a fresh-faced, younger girl, slim, really physically fit, exciting. And when Chris talked to the police, he said when he saw her, it just blew him away. She was so beautiful. Now, Chris told her that he was working on a separation from Shanann and that he had 2 children. Now, this is my own feeling. If you meet some guy and he tells you he's working on a separation, that means he's still married, okay? And so why not wait until that divorce, if that's going to happen, is actually finalized to meet with and consummate the relationship? But they did. And in fact, those 6 weeks or 5 weeks, because Chris came the 6th week, the 5 weeks that Shanann was in North Carolina, Chris was with this young lady. I'm not going to say what her name was, but he was with this young lady, spending time, having fun, freedom, living the single life, intimacy, and everything else. I'm not going to say the lady is to blame for this, because she isn't to blame for the crime. Not at all. But I would just say that she lacked maturity. Now, on August 15th, the police asked Chris to come down to the police station once again. Here's the deal. When your spouse is murdered or disappearing, the first person they're looking at is you, okay? It's just common. They're going to look at you. And so they brought him down and they questioned him, and he told his story several different times. But unbeknownst to Chris, they had found this lady, the one that he was having an affair with, and they'd already found out that they had an intimate relationship, and they had been seeing each other regular, and they had made promises of being together. So they question Chris, but they don't tell him anything about that. And once they finish questioning Chris, they ask Chris, would you take a lie detector test, a polygraph test? And he agrees. Now, you don't have to take a polygraph test if you don't want to. You can choose not to, because it's not even, the results of the polygraph test is not even admissible in court. But on the 15th of August, Chris tells them yes. And kind of interesting, because one of the detectives has them all strapped in, and she says to him, one of us knows what happened to your wife. And by the end of this polygraph test, both of us will know what happened to your wife. Very interesting, very insightful. So he takes the polygraph test, and the detectives leave the room. And then they come back in a little bit later with Chris in there. And they tell him that his lie detector test comes up deceptive. And he's shocked, and he's saying it's emotions and things like that. And they're sort of playing good cop, bad cop with him. They're saying, yes, you could be emotional. And that was the lady. She was trying to play in the good cop. And the male cop was saying, Chris, we know what happened. And Chris starts confessing about this affair that he's having. And the police officer tells him, or the detective tells him, you don't have to tell us. We already know. We talked to her. We know about the situation that you were involved in. Don't bother telling us the story. Now they ask him point blank, Chris, do you know what happened to your wife? And he starts to get into this whole emotional workup of trying to deny. And the detective tells him to stop. Breathe. You need to breathe. You need to stop. So he relaxes for just a brief moment, and then he goes on with denials. He doesn't know what happened. He has no idea. It is very clear that the detectives know that he's done this. They just don't know how it happened and where the bodies are. They keep going on with the questioning for quite some time. He continues to deny. He almost gets to the point where he's ready to break, and then he asks, can he speak to his dad? Come to find out, his dad had flown from North Carolina to Colorado to be the support for Chris. His dad is actually at the police station waiting in another room. So they allow the dad to come into the room with Chris. The detectives leave. They tell them you can have as much time as you want. All the while, Chris is on camera, doesn't realize that the camera's behind him over his head. First, the dad is kind of asking him what happened, what's going on, and Chris kind of holds back. And finally he says that Shanann killed the kids. Grandpa is shocked beyond belief. He just can't believe it. He even repeats it. Shanann killed the kids? And Chris says, yeah, and that she smothered them. And the grandfather seems like he kind of believes it, but at the same time, it's hard to believe because anybody who saw Shanann's vlogging, she was a huge vlogger. She recorded every step that the family made, every move those children made, every moment. She always vlogged, and never was there a time that showed anything other than her loving up on those girls and happy that the baby was coming and loving Chris. But this is Chris' story. And then Chris says that I killed her out of rage because she had killed the children. Now, this almost soothes the grandfather or his father, as if he wanted to hear something positive out of it. However, the detectives come back in the room. They let the grandfather sit in there for a while. They hear what's going on. They let Chris know that they've heard that Shanann killed the kids and that he had to kill her. And they made it seem as if we understand. You was a fit of rage. You had to do what you had to do. And so then they ask Chris, can you show us where the bodies are, or where are they? And he begins to, break down and let them know that they're not going to find them. No one's going to find them. And they tell him, you know what? People out at your work site, because he lets them know they're at his work site. And they let him know you don't want people to find them. Trust me, you don't want somebody else to find their bodies there. And so he agrees to tell them where they are. They ask Grandpa, his father, to leave the room. When the father leaves the room, the detectives go back to good cop, bad cop. You've got the lady who's consoling him, and the male cop says, you know what? This doesn't make sense. Why would Shanann kill 2 of her children and she's pregnant with a third? Nah. He said, but we're getting close to the truth, and you're going to tell it. And so they sit with him for a few more hours. And then it's presented to him that he can either get the death penalty and continue lying because they're going to find him guilty no matter what, basically, or they can make a deal for him and he can tell the truth. And Chris ended up confessing that he had, when Shanann had come home that night, he ended up confessing to her that he was having an affair. Now, Chris confesses that he is having an affair. This is after he and Shanann have had an intimate moment in bed, and he's still like on top of Shanann. And Shanann tells him, get off of me, get off of me. I knew that you were having an affair. I knew it. She tells him, you're never going to see these children again. You're never going to see this baby. Get off of me. And at that time, that's when Chris snapped. He choked her. This is his story. He says he choked her. And he then wraps her in a sheet and drags her down to his truck, which is why it was not in the garage, which the neighbor was correct. He drug her outside and put her on the floor in the truck. And actually, they didn't, there is a story I saw, I think it was on the ID channel. I love that channel. But they actually have the footage of the neighbor's camera showing him coming in and out carrying things. But he wraps her in a sheet. He puts her on the floorboard of the back seat. And then he gets the babies, who are still alive, he says, and he puts them in the back seat, straps them in, and he drives out to his work site. Once he gets to the work site, the little girls are asking what's happening to mommy. They're in the back seat. They're kind of sleepy. They're holding on to each other. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what's wrong with mommy. He takes the first child and he smothers her, and that is Cece. She doesn't fight or anything. And he takes her out of the car. And now he comes back for Bella. And he puts the blanket over her head And he remembers her saying, "No, Daddy." And then he kills her. He makes a shallow grave and he puts Shanann in the shallow grave in front of the big oil tanks. And he puts the girls inside the oil tanks. And he leaves them. Then he goes back home and he proceeds to sell Shanann's car. He contacts a realtor to put the house up for sale. And then he's in touch with his girlfriend, and they're texting back and forth about this new life that they're going to begin to live. And just a side note so that you know that Shanann was no fool. When Shanann had seen their bank statement, she looked at it and she saw there was $63 and change that had been used at a place called the Lazy Dog Bar and Grill. And she asked Chris about it. And he said he went there and had beers. Well, Shanann actually went online and looked at the menu and saw that there was no beers that were worth $63. He couldn't have drunk that many beers. But he still would not confess to it. And he felt like at this point, he didn't even care anymore if she found out about whoever he was dealing with because he was so caught up in it. Ultimately, Chris decided to plead guilty, and that stopped him from getting the death penalty. He was charged with 9 counts of murder and kidnap and many other things. And he now sits in life in prison. He's got 3 life sentences that he's going to have to deal with. So at this point, I want to take a look at Chris. And I'm going to look at his natal sign because it tells me a lot about what was going on inside of him. Now, this happened in 2018, and the universal year was 11. So that meant that everybody had to learn hard lessons. And if this is not a hard lesson, I don't know what is. So when I look at him, 11, 12, 14... yeah, he was in a number 5 personal year. So that meant that he was leaving. He was going to leave the situation. Number 5 year is about fun and freedom and changes to yourself. He had lost 245 pounds and was down to 180 pounds. And he worked out like crazy. It's about outside changes. It's about wanting to escape from whatever you were under. And I think that the pressure of Shanann telling him that she was pregnant with a 3rd child was like another weight on his neck. But this is what you signed up for. But he decided to go with his heart. Now, interesting enough, a number 5 year can be when you actually find your soulmate. So he probably did have a very strong connection to this other female. So Chris had freedom in his chart. I looked at his chart. He had complete freedom. He could have not done this. He had a choice not to, and he decided to go with his plan anyway. In addition, Shanann had a tendency to put her business about Chris, good or bad, on the internet. She was a vlogger. So she was constantly on, whether she was joking about something he did or ridiculing him about something he did. And that was just very painful for him because he liked doing things privately. And that's because he has a rising in Scorpio. So with his rising in Scorpio, he was mysterious and secretive. And that's why Shanann didn't know he had an affair. She would have never known what was going on. Shanann wouldn't have known that he had plans to do away with her. He would have held in and repressed his anger, and that's what he was doing, holding his anger in and repressing it. That's just the nature of a Scorpio. Until they get so upset, it just explodes. Excuse me, guys, I got to get some Bubba. His sun is in Taurus. So his sun is in Taurus and his Mercury in Taurus. That's why his plan wasn't that great. No slam to any Tauruses, but take this as I'm telling it to you. Taurus is a slow processor of information. They have to have structure. They like structure. They like plans. They just don't come up with them fast enough. And yet he had the moon, the emotional side of him. His moon and his Venus were in Aries. So his emotions were rushing out to this lady, rushing to get this done. But that Taurus side of him didn't have a clear plan, didn't even have a real story. In fact, the story of him saying that Shanann killed the kids and he had to kill her was the story that the detective told him. The detective threw that story out just to see would he grab onto that, and he did. That wasn't even his plan. His Mars was in Gemini, which means that he could flare up. You think about a tornado coming through. You know, that was him. He could flare up, shut down. Yeah. And then he's got his Jupiter in Aquarius, so he really wanted bigger things in life. And one of the big things he wanted was freedom. Chris probably would have been better without even being married to anyone. Let me take a look again at his birthday. Yeah, he's 16. He would like to be independent, doing his own thing, making his own decisions, and he would like to have somebody else take the responsibility. That's somebody that needs a mother. Chris was very immature because not only was Shanann a controlling woman, and she was, but for the right things. Bossy, she was, for the right things though. His mom and sister were the same way. The females around him were all very controlling, and him, being that Scorpio, would be angry and resentful, but not let it out there. Anything that Shanann would have said to him as a Scorpio, he would have kept it logged. He would have kept it logged inside, and he would have been very angry. And if he had had the courage, or as Shanann said, the balls, he would have told her about it. But he didn't. That Mars is in Gemini, and Mars in Gemini doesn't like a lot of confrontation and conflicts. You know, we'll deal with it. We'll try to figure it out in ourselves. But he's got Scorpio rising, Scorpio in Saturn. So he had a lot of Scorpio in him. And this just was an angry man. He was just an angry man and couldn't let it out. Now, Shanann, sadly to say, she had destiny in her chart. So this was destined to happen to her. Their relationship was destined to happen. Could she have free choice inside of destiny? Absolutely. Absolutely. Even though destiny says you're going to have to take this road, she could have decided, I'll be on that road because that's what the universe, God, whatever, wants me to go down, but I won't marry him. I could have married someone else. But then with destiny, it could have been the same outcome no matter what, unfortunately for her. Now, her rising is in Aries. His moon and his Venus is in Aries. That's him jumping around from person to person, thing to thing, angry. And her rising in Aries and her moon in Aries also, I'm telling you, they fought in that house. I'm going to tell you something that the dad believed, and I'm going to tell you I believe it too. They had a picture of Chris after he confessed with his shirt off, showing his arms, his upper torso, back, what have you. No scratch on there. Nah, no. Shanann would have been a fighter. I'm here to tell you. She would have been fighting, scratching, clawing. So I think that Shanann fell asleep, and that's when he killed her. That's when he killed her. I can see it. I can see it. That's when he killed her, right then and there. Not that, you know, he was on top of her and she said, get off, and then he sprang into action. No. He would have been that Scorpio and Saturn, that Scorpio and rising, that he would have done secretly. Secretly, he would have killed her, not to her face. Her sun is in Capricorn, her Mercury is in Capricorn, and that speaks to her really being very driven, goal-oriented, had an agenda, knew about moving things step by step, understand the money and how to use it and how to save it, because she was notorious about saving money. That's why when she saw $63 spent at the Lazy Dog, she was livid. Like, who spends $63 by yourself? That's when she knew. That's why she, at 25, she built her own house. Built, do you hear me? Because she knew how to deal with money. Her Venus is in Sagittarius. That made her, in a sense, controlling, okay? She didn't want to be possessed. She didn't want to be controlled, but she wanted to be sure that she knew where you were at all time. Yeah, so this situation is Chris lost it. Chris had it in him no matter what. If it hadn't have been Shanann, it would have been this next girl or somebody else. Chris was never meant to be married. And some people aren't. Relationship, one thing. Marriage, no. He wasn't really that type of person that could really commit like that. He wasn't going to be able to control her the way he would have wanted to, the way he wanted to. She just wasn't going to be had. She wasn't going to be controlled. My gut tells me that he killed her while she was asleep. And my gut tells me he killed the girls at the site and then done away with it. That Scorpio trying to lie, that didn't work out good. And the thing about it was, with that Aries, different Aries placements he had, he did get upset. But once it was done, I think he did have remorse in a sense, because Aries flare up, but they get over it. And now it was like, what can I do? The one thing that boggles me, and it really just pisses me off, is that him taking the girls out there was a 45-minute to an hour drive with their mother dead on the floorboard of the car. He could have turned around at any moment, but he didn't. He had that plan in place, and he was going to see that plan through, where he was going to have the life that he really wanted and get rid of all this baggage. It was sort of like, I've got rid of your mom, I guess I might as well get rid of you too. Rather than not do any of it, or if he did that, raise his own children. He didn't even want to do that. He was a very immature boy man. He never got a chance to stand up and be a man. His father even was smothery with him, and he wasn't a man enough for Shanann, and she didn't know. She was loving a young guy. Guys, that's what I have for you on that particular case. Very sad case. Really hurt my heart, honestly. When you look at the kids, they're so beautiful, and then the other child had no chance even coming into this world. But thank you so much, and have a great day.